December 1610. The wind howls through the Carpathian foothills like a mourner's wail, carrying the bite of winter that seeps into bones and refuses to let go. You stand at the iron-bound gates of Čachtice Castle, a fortress of grey stone perched on a jagged outcrop, its towers clawing at the slate sky, as if desperate to escape the earth below. The air thickens first with the scent of pine resin, sharp and resinous, mingling with something fouler damp rot from the cellars, perhaps, or the metallic tang of old blood that never quite washes away from flagstones. Your boots crunch on frost-rimed gravel as guards part the way, their faces pale masks under fur-trimmed hoods, eyes averted as if the very walls whisper secrets too heavy to bear. A low rumble echoes from within, not thunder, but the distant clamour of chains dragging across stone, punctuated by muffled cries that could be wind or women, impossible to tell until you're inside. The great hall opens before you, torches sputtering in iron sconces, casting shadows that dance like spectres across tapestries frayed by time and neglect. Servants huddle in corners, their linen shifts stained with what might be soot or something darker, breath fogging the chill air as they murmur prayers in halting Latin. Then the sight hits, sprawled across the rushes. A girl, no, a young woman, her dark hair matted, limbs twisted at angles that mock the grace of life. Her skin, once perhaps flushed with the vigour of youth, now bears the pallor of wax, lips parted, as if to plead one final time. The room reeks now, unmistakably, of iron and waste, the aftermath of agony that lingers like a curse. György Thurzó, Palatine of Hungary, steps forward, his velvet cloak swirling, face hardening into the granite resolve of a man who has seen too much, yet not enough to prepare for this. He takes one look and barks orders, his voice slicing the silence. Seal the doors. Summon the king's men. This ends tonight. What kind of mind builds a kingdom of screams within walls meant to protect? What machinery of power turns a noble home into a charnel house, where the innocent are harvested like wheat in autumn? Before we go further, I need to be transparent. What you're about to hear involves systematic torture and elements of sexual violence, drawn from the grim testimonies of the 1,611 trials and György Thurzó's own dispatches to King Matthias II. These details are historically documented, corroborated by interrogations of over 50 witnesses and preserved in the Hungarian National Archives, but they are deeply disturbing, evoking the raw machinery of unchecked authority that preys on the vulnerable. If this weighs too heavily, if the shadows here press too close, step away without a second thought. There's no shame in guarding your own light against such darkness. For those who remain, know that I approach this with the solemnity it demands. We'll illuminate not the spectacle of suffering, but the architecture of evil that permitted it, the feudal hierarchies, the patriarchal enforcements, the economic grind that rendered lives disposable. These accounts aren't fodder for fascination, they're beacons, urging us to dismantle the systems that still echo in boardrooms and borders today, where power whispers the same old permissions. This wasn't the frenzy of a lone madwoman, a gothic villainess dipping into forbidden tomes under thunderous skies. This was a machine, oiled by the creaking gears of 16th century Hungary, noble privilege codified into law, serfdom that chained souls to soil, and a patriarchy that viewed women as vessels for inheritance or indulgence, their bodies battlegrounds for control. Elizabeth Báthory, born into the crimson robes of the Báthory dynasty, one of Europe's most formidable houses, did not invent this apparatus. She inherited it, wielded it, and perhaps was consumed by it. Her castle, a microcosm of an empire where the Ottoman shadow loomed from the south, Habsburg ambitions clawed from the west, and internal feuds festered like untreated wounds. The question isn't whether you can stomach the ledger of her alleged crimes up to 650 young women, their names scratched in haste on trial lists now yellowed in Vienna's archives. It's whether you're willing to remember the why, how absolute power, unchecked by kin or crown, transmutes grief into grievance, isolation into invention. In an era when Hungary teetered between Reformation fires and counter-Reformation inquisitions, where witch hunts snared the desperate and debtors schemed against the debt-ridden, Báthory's story refracts the era's fractures. Modern parallels glare back. Think of the corporate enclosures that commodify care workers today, or the digital veils behind which abuse proliferates in elite enclaves. Scholar Raymond T. McNally, in his 1983 analysis, Dracula Was a Woman, sifts the chaff of legend from the grain of record, noting how political rivals like Thurzó amplified accusations to seize her vast estates. Yet Laszlo Nagy's 1,960 excavations of trial documents reveal consistent threads of testimony, not mere fabrication. This machine didn't hum in isolation. It was fed by a society where noble women, widowed and wealthy, navigated a labyrinth of male oversight guardians appointed, like jailers, debts to monarchs mounting like storm clouds. Báthory's husband, Ferenc Nadasdy, a warlord forged in the crucibles of border skirmishes against the Turks, left her not just lands, but a legacy of martial entitlement. When he perished in 1604, amid the long Turkish war's draining sieges, she stood as chatelaine of Čachtice, a bastion of 300 souls, its cellars echoing with the labor of the indentured. But power, in such hands, curdles. As Kimberly L. Craft details in her 2009 infamous Lady, the Countess's isolation bred a pathology of possession, where servants became extensions of self, their vitality siphoned to stave off the entropy of aging in a court that prized youth as currency. If you believe these voices faded ink on forgotten folios deserve resurrection, consider subscribing. Every engagement unearths more from the shadowed stacks, ensuring the silence speak anew. To understand the harvest of horrors reaped within Čachtice's walls, you must first grasp the forge that shaped its architect, a Hungary rent by religious schisms and imperial jockeying, where the Báthory name evoked both reverence and recoil. It was the late 16th century, a land bisected by the Danube's languid curve, its plains scarred by Ottoman incursions that had culled a third of the population in the Mohacs disaster of 1526. Transylvania simmered as a Protestant bulwark under Báthory princes Elizabeth's uncles, György and Zsigmond, princes of that fractious duchy, while the royal Hungary bowed to Habsburg Matthias II, whose coffers bled from endless campaigns. Economically, it was a ledger of ledgers, serfs bound to barons' whims, their corvées funding armories against the port, while noble houses like the Nadasdys amassed fortresses as both strongholds and status symbols. Social hierarchies stratified like sedimentary rock clergy, intoning Latin masses in gilded basilicas, burghers haggling in Buddha's markets, and peasants eking yields from black earth, their daughters bartered as brides or bridesmaids to seal alliances. Čachtice itself, perched in the Vag Valley's crook, was no fairy tale turret but a utilitarian sprawl, outer bailey for livestock, inner keep for kin, its chapel a stone sentinel, overlooking vineyards that yielded middling wine. Politically, it pulsed with the era's tensions. Elizabeth's marriage in 1575 to Ferenc Nadasdy tethered the Báthory's Transylvanian might to the Nadasdy's western martial prowess, a union brokered to counter Turkish probes at Esztergom. Yet beneath the pageantry lurked the machinery of control, the ius primi noctis, whispered in jest but enforced in shadow, noble rights to discipline servants, codified in the tripartitum of 1517, that legal tome granting lords near sovereign sway over their domains. As Valentine Penrose recounts in her 1970 The Bloody Countess, drawing from Thurzó's 1610 epistle, this was a world where assets human chattel were inventoried alongside oxen, their value measured in labour or leverage. Archaeological whispers corroborate. Digs at Čachtice in the 1972 unearthed iron manacles in the cellars, corroded but unmistakable, dated via carbon traces to the late 1500s. No bloodstains linger stone, weeps them away, but the absence speaks. Routine erasure, the system's first protocol. According to the Venetian dispatches of 1611, archived in the Cora Library, envoys marvelled at the castle's opulence, masking its underbelly, where the Countess's whims were law, and law was whim. This wasn't anomaly, it was archetype. In an age of psychological warfare, Ferenc's troops salting Turkish wells with plague-ridden hides, the domestic front mirrored the brutal, wives as regents wielding the whip when husbands warred. Elizabeth wasn't born to this void. She emerged the 7th of August 1560 in György Castle, a cradle of crimson ambition amid the Báthory's labyrinthine holdings. Her father, György Báthory the Black, was a hulking figure, broad as a siege engine, his beard streaked with the silver of Transylvanian winters, eyes sharp as the falcon on his crest. A Calvinist enforcer in a Catholic court, he navigated alliances with the subtlety of a blade, his voice a gravel rumble that quelled lesser lords at diet assemblies. Yet tenderness flickered. Witnesses recall him cradling infant Elizabeth during pestilence outbreaks, murmuring Slovak lullabies against the fever's grip. Her mother, Anna, from the Slovak Somlyo clan, was willowy, her auburn hair coiled like serpents. Personality, a quiet storm devout Lutheran, she stitched samplers with verses from Psalms, her hands calloused from managing estates while György campaigned. They doted, or so family chroniclers claim, shielding their only daughter from the era's coarseness. No wet, nurse beatings, no early betrothals to doddering dukes. By age 6, the pathologies stirred. A cousin's epileptic fit, common in the inbred nobility, triggered her first recorded cruelty. She watched, transfixed, as retainers whipped the seizing boy, her small fists clenched, not in horror, but curiosity. "Why does he dance so?" she asked, per a letter from her aunt Clara Báthory, preserved in the Erdely family papers. Education followed rigorously. Latin tutors drilled Cicero's Stoics into her dawn, sharp mind, while Hungarian bards spun tales of Hunyadi's glories. She rode like a centaur by 9, falconry gloves her constant companions, the bird's jesses mirroring her own budding reigns on the world. The family, vast as an oak, began its withering. György the Black succumbed in 1567 to a poisoned chalice at a feast rival magnate's, whispers Thurzó's later inquest. Lacing his wine with belladonna, he convulsed for days, foam flecking his lips. Elizabeth, at 9, witnessing the froth, the final rattle that echoed in her dreams. Anna lingered, her health frayed by grief. But in 1570, during a smallpox scourge sweeping from Istanbul, vesicles bloomed on her throat. She perished, rasping Elizabeth's name, the girl at 10 pressing a linen cloth to the pustules, inhaling the sickly sweet rot that marked the end. Uncles followed. Zsigmond, the elder prince, fell to Turkish arrows at Győr in 1576. His body returned headless, salt, preserved. György the younger, her godfather, rotted in a debtor's prison in 1601, his estate seized by Habsburg taxmen. By 15, married off to Ferenc, she was the last branch standing, the dynasty's lone shoot in a forest felled. There never was a better servant, nor a worse master. Suetonius might have quipped of such trajectories, but here it fit her ascent. The wedding at Vranov, 1575. She, in pearl, stitched velvet. He, in polished plate, their vows sealing 17,000 acres from Sava to the Little Carpathians. Ferenc, 19 and battle-hardened, towered with russet beard and scars from Vienna's walls, his personality a forge tender in bedchambers, tyrannical on fields, drilling peasant levies till blisters burst. They sired 4, daughters Anna, Orsolia, Catalin, and son Pal, each birth a triumph amid miscarriages that left Elizabeth hollow, eyed, physicians bleeding her with lancets to balance humours. The transformation staged itself in shadows. Early years, dutiful consort, managing ledgers while Ferenc harried ottomans, her quill scripting dowries, her voice quelling unruly maids with slaps that escalated from correction to compulsion. A 1,585 incident, per Nadesty estate rolls, saw her ordering a groom flogged for a lame horse. The man's back peeled like birch bark, but it was her gaze rapt, unblinking that witnesses noted. Widowhood in 1604 shattered the facade. Ferenc's death from fever in Sopron, his body waxen under burial shrouds, left her 44, heiress to a war machine idled. Isolation crept. Guardians like Thurzó circled. Debts to Matthias mounted from Pal's dissipations. And then everything changed, as one servant testified in 1611. A nocturnal visitor, Anna Darvulia, the witch of the woods, cloaked in herbs and incantations, whispered of elixirs drawn from youth's essence, binding Elizabeth in rites that blurred discipline into devotion. The Countess's chambers, once scented with rose attar, now harboured phials of quicksilver and bone dust, her reflection in silver mirrors fracturing under candlelight. Psychological scholars like Rebecca Booth, in The Bloody Countess of Transylvania, 2016, trace the pivot, unresolved bereavements, compounding noble entitlement, yielding a dissociative dominion where others' pain recalibrated her own. By 1605, the machine whirred fully, servants summoned not for service but sacrifice, their cries the tolling of a private vesper. First came the summonings, those quiet caravans under moonless skies that threaded the Varg's mist-shrouded valleys into Čachtice's moor. It was spring 1606, The thaw-swelling rivers with meltwater that slapped against the castle's abutments like impatient fists, while lilac blossoms perfumed the air with false innocence. Elizabeth paced the solar, her black taffeta gown whispering against oak parquetry, the room aglow with beeswax tapers that dripped like slow tears onto wrought-iron stands. Present were her confidantes, Ilona Jo, the laundress with calloused palms and a widow's stoic gaze, clad in homespun wool, Dorothea Sentes, the nurse whose fingers, gnarled as roots, had once soothed babes, and young Fichko, the groom, his livery ill, fitting on a frame hardened by stable muck. Outside, the political winds howled Matthias's envoys demanding audits on Nadasdi levies, Turkish scouts probing Pressburg's gates, but within, the agenda was intimate, absolute. The air hummed with hearth smoke, acrid and woody, mingling with the faint, yeasty tang of fresh-baked bread from the kitchens below, a cruel counterpoint to the hollow bellies assembled. Elizabeth's voice, once melodic in Lutheran hymns, now commanded with the precision of a field marshal. Bring her. No name yet, just the abstraction, though records name her as Kata, a peasant woman of 23 from the hamlet of Bekov, her life a ledger of plough and prayer. Daughter of a thatcher, widowed by the 1593 famine, Kata had married young to a miller, birthing 2 sons, before Corvée called her husband to Ferdinand's banners. She arrived at the castle gates peddling linens, her kerchief framing a face weathered yet resilient, brown eyes holding the steady light of one who recited the Lord's Prayer against blight. They led her down winding stairs to the dungeons, torchlight flickering on vaulted ceilings slick with seepage, the stone chill seeping through her clogs like accusation. Elizabeth inspected her the way one might a bolt of damask fingers tilting chin, appraising the curve of neck, the pulse fluttering like a trapped moth. She'll do, came the verdict, soft as silk tearing. What followed was no outburst, but orchestration. Dorothea binding wrists with hemp ropes that bit into flesh, Ilona fetching the switch of birch, supple from the castle copse. Kata's thoughts, pieced from later testimonies, swirled with confusion had she shorted the Countess on thread, offended with a curtsy, her stomach knotted, dry as chaff, throat parched from the descent's dust. The switch whistled first, a reprimand for imagined sloth, landing across shoulders with a crack that echoed off walls. Kata bit her lip, tasting copper, whispering paternoster under breath, her faith a fragile bulwark. Hours stretched, the rhythm methodical pause, inspect, resume the air thickening with sweat and the faint, coppery mist of exertion. Elizabeth directed, her commands clipped. Higher. Make it sing. Not frenzy, but calibration, testing the instrument of will. When Kata slumped, breath ragged, they dragged her to a pallet of straw, leaving her to the rat's scrutiny. She did not break that night. Dawn found her murmuring vespers, gaze fixed on a crack admitting feeble light. This wasn't caprice, a noble's tantrum quelled by morning wine. This was the system's primer, feudal entitlement distilled, where serfs' bodies were the currency of correction, their endurance, the metric of mastery. In Hungary's tripartitum, lords held dominium eminens, high dominion over their people, a legal fiction that blurred discipline into dominion. Thurzó's 1610 report to Matthias, unearthed in the Hofburg archives, catalogues such customs across estates, from Nadasdi's own floggings at Sarvar. But here, it mutated, revealing power's pyramid. Elizabeth, perched apex, enacting the era's cruelties on a personal ledger. Modern parallels sting corporate performance reviews that bruise psyches, or domestic enforcements in gated enclaves where wealth whispers impunity. Scholars debate the pivot. Was it Darvulia's occult nudge per 1,611 interrogations, or deeper pathology? Graham Mostyn, in his 2024 Cambridge thesis, The Framed Countess, argues political foreshadowing Thurzó's spies, already tallying grievances to justify intervention. Yet the testimonies converge. 50 witnesses, from stable boys to surgeons, attesting to the switch's routine arc. Long-term, it frayed the social weave, villages depopulated, whispers of hauntings deterring labourers, echoing the Ottoman depredations that had already hollowed the land. They didn't seek confessions, truth was irrelevant. They forged compliance, ghosts preferable to rebels. Elizabeth wasn't destroying flesh alone. She was unspooling the threads of community, leaving tatters that no loom could mend. But the machine demanded fuel, and one reprimand could not sate its growing hunger. What unfurled next exposed the accomplices' weave, turning isolated corrections into covenanted cruelties, the castle's undercroft a stage for synchronized shadows. Midway through this descent, if the weight presses the ledgers of loss piling like autumn leaves, pause. You're here because remembrance is resistance. The path ahead steepens, but together we trace it, honoring the silenced by seeing the scaffold they endured. The accomplices deepen the design, their loyalties forged in the forge of fear and favor, transforming sporadic strikes into a symphony of subjugation. It was autumn 1607, leaves carpeting the Vag in russet shrouds, the harvest moon bloated and indifferent as it silvered the castle's ramparts. Fog rolled from the river, cloaking the outer wards where peasants threshed the last rye under torchlight, their chants, folk tunes of reapers and rain muffled by the damp that seeped into cloaks and bones alike. Elizabeth held court in the armory, repurposed for her rituals, its walls lined with Ferent's rusted halberds that gleamed dully in rushlight, the air heavy with linseed oil and the musty undertone of stored woolens. Arrayed before her, Darvulia, the herbalist, her skirts embroidered with thistle motifs, face gaunt under a coif of greying braids, her aura one of whispered winds. Beside her, the sisters Jo and Sentes, their aprons stiff with starch, eyes downcast yet complicit. Fichko, shifting on calloused feet, his tunic reeking of horse sweat. The summons this time arrived by raven black-feathered missive from a distant village, bearing the seal of a desperate reeve offering tribute to offset tithes. Political undercurrents churned, Matthias's 1,606 truce with the Turks fragile, taxes squeezing barons like vice, driving serfs to flight or fealty. Elizabeth's coffers, drained by Pal's Viennese excesses, craved this currency of control. The air tasted of fermented apples from the cellars below, a deceptive sweetness undercut by the acrid bite of fear sweat from the gathered. Enter Maria, a widow of 28 from the uplands near Trenčín, her frame sturdy from years tending looms and livestock, hair cropped practical under a linen cap, eyes the colour of storm clouds, holding the quiet defiance of one who had buried a husband to border raids and raised 3 daughters alone. She came as laundress, basket brimming with hems and hose, thinking of wages to buy salt for winter, her mind on the eldest girl's betrothal. The Countess seeks skilled hands. The cartman had lied, his voice oily as axle grease. They escorted her to the buttery, a vaulted chamber where churns stood idle, flagstones slick with spilled whey that squelched underfoot. Elizabeth circled, appraising with a proprietor's eye, fingers tracing the vein at Maria's temple. Strong pulse, she murmured, as if diagnosing a faltering mare. Darvulia chanted low in Sekli dialect, ancient Carpathian incantations against fading bloom, while Sentes prepared the bindings, hemp cords knotted with herbal poultices that burned on contact. Maria's confusion mounted, stomach churning like curds, throat tight as she demanded, "What offence, my lady?" No answer, only the door's thud. The rite commenced with immersion, stripped to shift, doused in icy well water that shocked lungs, Darvulia intoning of rebirth through trial. Then the switches, multiple now, wielded in tandem Ilona from the left, Fichko from right, their arcs intersecting in a brutal ballet. Maria gasped, the lash painting fire across ribs, but she twisted, spitting defiance. God sees, even here. Hours blurred, the room a cauldron of laboured breaths and dripping tapers. Elizabeth observing from a throned settle, her commands the conductor's baton. Deeper, draw the essence. Skip the depths. When they hauled her forth at cockcrow, Maria's gaze had shuttered, body a map of welts, yet her lips moved in silent Ave Maria, unbroken filament of faith. This escalation unveiled the network's nerve, not solitary sadism, but a cabal codifying cruelty, each participant, a cog, Darvulia, the mystic justification, the others, the muscle of mundanity. Trial records from 1611, transcribed in the Bratislava archives, detail their oaths, sworn on relics in the chapel crypt, binding them to the preservation of the house. It mirrored the era's secret societies, Rosicrucian whispers in Prague, Jesuit cabals in Rome where ideology armoured atrocity. But here, the ideology was intimate, youth as elixir, power as panacea against widows' obsolescence. Debate swirls in academia. Tony Thorne's 1997, Countess Dracula, posits Darvulia as scapegoat, her witchcraft a Habsburg ploy to taint Protestant Bathories. Yet the testimony's uniformity over 30 deponents, naming the buttery's stains, suggests verity amid venom. Broader patterns emerge, noble women's isolation fostering folie à plusieurs, akin to the Medicis poison rings. Societally, it eroded trust. Villages shunned Čachtice roads. Labour fled to Habsburg mines. The domains yield halving by 1609 per estate rolls. Elizabeth dismantled not just bodies but bonds, crafting ghosts to haunt the harvest. They sought no martyrs. Martyrs rally. They forged phantoms, invisible in the social ledger, their absence, the true theft. The coven thickened, but invention beckoned beyond the lash, toward torments that mocked the elements themselves. What happened next reveals the machine's meteorological malice, harnessing winter's bite to brittle the spirit. The castle, a frozen forge for forged submission. Winter 1608 clamped the Varg in iron jaws, snowdrifts swallowing hedgerows. The wind, keening through arrow slits like banshees, denied their due. Icicles fringed the battlements, crystalline daggers glinting under a sun too feeble to thaw, while inside the great hall, braziers crackled with beech logs that spat resinous sparks onto hearths. Elizabeth convened in the scriptorium, parchments of Ovid and herbal grimoires strewn across walnut desks, the air laced with ink's metallic bite, and the herbal steam from Darvulia's cauldron, wormwood and mandrake, bubbling like accusations. Attendees, the core quartet, plus new inductee, the cook Benedek, his apron grease, stiffened, face florid from kitchen fumes, all in woolens layered against the seep. Elsewhere, the realm reeled, long war's armistice fraying, Turkish Akuncu raiding Pressburg, Matthias levying emergency scutage that pinched even Báthory purses. Elizabeth's isolation deepened, letters from Vienna unanswered, her son's tutors fleeing rumours. The summons slithered via estate bailiffs. The Countess requires seamstresses for the solstice fete. The air tasted of hoarfrost, crisp and unforgiving, undercut by the sour ferment of sauerkraut from Lenten stores. She was Judith, 31, a weaver from the lowlands near Nitra, her hands veined from shuttle and spindle, hair streaked grey from burying 4 infants to flux, eyes deep set with the wisdom of widowhood after her husband's fall at Sisak. Mother to a surviving boy of 10, she journeyed with bolt of linen, mind on fees for his apprenticeship, humming Sepp Assani toward the cold. At the postern, guards relieved her of coin purse, leading to the outer bailey where snow mounded like fresh graves. The descent to the snow court. Blindfolded, shift, clad, the chill, 1,000 needles pricking skin. Elizabeth decreed the winnowing, stripped bare under the elements, bound to posts amid drifts, the wind flaying like invisible scourges. Judith shivered, teeth chattering, credo fragments, thoughts of her son's hearthfire fueling futile tugs at cords. Hours passed, frost-rhyming lashes, the group Darvulia chanting, others shoveling drifts to deepen exposure, watching as body heat ebbed, will with it. Elizabeth paced, breath clouding, let the pure remain. Skip the Nadia. Dawn thawed her to the guardroom, limbs numb, spirit scoured, yet she rasped a curse in Slovak, her humanity a spark unquenched. This wasn't elemental caprice, but engineered erasure, winter weaponized as the system's scalpel, carving compliance from cold. The tripartitum tacitly permitted such exposures for vagrants, but here it privatized punishment. The castle, a climate-controlled charnel. Kraft's infamous lady cross-references 1,611 depositions with meteorological logs, confirming anomalous freezes correlating with victim tallies. It echoed Ottoman Kushla tortures, or Habsburg ice cells in Spielberg Power's perennial ally against the flesh. Contention persists. Florescu's 1994, Dracula, Prince of Many Faces, suggests exaggeration for debt cancellation, yet survivor accounts, 3 women, pardoned for testimony, detail the post's positions. Impacts rippled, surf flight surged, domains fallow, mirroring the 30 Years' War's preludes, Elizabeth unmade mothers, unraveling lineages like frayed warp. Ghosts, not grudges, were the goal silences that snowed over resistance. Yet the frost yielded to fires more, the machine pivoting to pyres of the psyche. On the cusp of another thaw, the inferno ignited, flames licking not just skin, but the soul's scaffolding, the castle's hearths, hellmouths for the hollowed. Summer 1609 baked the Carpathians, dust devils swirling through parched vineyards, the air shimmering with heat that baked bread in shadowed eaves without ovens. Cicadas droned a dirge from the orchards, while thunderstorms grumbled distant, promising rain that never fell. Elizabeth retreated to the still room, shelves groaning under alembics and phials of attar, the space redolent of lavender and sulphur, a alchemist's den where distillation doubled as domination. The circle expanded. Joe, Sentes, Fichko, Darvulia, now with the chambermaid Zuzana, her kirtle lavender, scented, eyes wide with the awe of the newly ensnared. The empire edged toward rupture. Matthias crowned Holy Roman Emperor, his Hungarian throne contested, debts to Báthory's ballooning from war indemnities. Whispers of audit reached Čachtice, spurring preemption. The call went out. Maids for the Countess's wardrobe, taste the brine of sweat, the tartness of unripe plums scavenged from walls. Her name was Esther, 26. A dairymaid from the meadows of Puchov, robust from milking and mucking, freckles dusting cheeks flushed by labor, gaze steady as the Carpathian peaks. Widowed by a mill dam breach, her 2 daughters fostered with kin. She arrived with curds in cloth, dreaming of dowry for their futures, her steplight despite the heat. To the still room's annex, a brick-lined alcove with forge bellows, where coals glowed like malevolent eyes. Elizabeth ordained the tempering, bound to a trestle, shift singed away, hot tongs glowing from the brands poised for purification. Esther pleaded, voice cracking on family pleas, stomach roiling with bile. The press came measured, the sizzle implied in her arch, Darvulia's herbs smeared to seal virtue. Elizabeth oversaw, voice clinical, hold the line. Skip the blaze. They quenched her in troughs, skin blistered, will charred, but she sang a fragment of Luther's Ein Fester Berg, her resistance a ember enduring. This pyretic protocol exposed the system's sadistic science, heat as hieroglyph of hierarchy, branding bodies to bind below. Nagy's 1,961 amperes. Fairlow compiles trial forensic scars matching tong patterns, linking to noble marking customs in Werbuchi's code. Parallels to modern waterboarding or corporate burnout. Endurance as ideology. Mostyn's revisionism flags testimonial coercion, but consistencies persist across classes. Society splintered further, healers shunned, births dropped, the land's fertility mocked by its ladies' barren rights. Elizabeth incinerated not just exteriors but existences, ashes of autonomy scattered. They craved no phoenixes, rebirth threatens, only cinders swept into oblivion. The flames faded, but precision pierced next, needles threading nightmare into nerve. While embers cooled, the arsenal refined to pinpricks, the machine miniaturizing mayhem, each jab a jurisprudence of the jugular. Late autumn, 1609, gales stripping beaches bare, leaves skittering like fleeing souls across the inner courtyard. Lanterns swung from chains, casting juddering pools on cobbles slick with fallen rain, the air sharp with ozone and decaying foliage. Elizabeth brooded in the oratory, prie-dieu scarred by knees, icons of the Virgin gazing sternly amid flickering vigil lamps that smelled of olive oil and incense. The cadre, full now, Zuzana trembling, Benedek sullen, all in somber surge against the gloom. Tensions piqued Thurzó's missives demanding inventories, Pal's scandals in Pressburg fueling court gossip, the edict, needlewomen for embroidery. The wind carried peat smoke, earthy and choking. She was Rosalia, 29, an embroideress from Bratislava's fringes, fingers nimble from stitching altar cloths, face heart-shaped under a wimple, eyes hazel, with the humour of one who jested through her husband's typhus grave, her sister the sole kin left. Basket of silks in tow, she envisioned payment for a pilgrimage. To the oratory's vestry, needle case proffered as irony. Elizabeth selected pins sewing steel, sterilized in flame for the refinement, affixed to walls, limbs splayed, each puncture plotted like a tapestry's stitch. Rosalia bargained, voice quavering on sibling vows, throat dust dry. The insertions came deliberate, Darvulia murmuring runes for clarity, the group rotating duties. Elizabeth noted, precision preserves. Skip the lattice. They unbound her at matins, punctures weeping, psyche perforated, yet she whispered Magnificat, thread of tenacity intact. This acupuncture of agony laid bare the bureaucracy of brutality. Pain passed as protocol, the body a canvas for control's calligraphy. 1,611 protocols list pin troves, echoing inquisitorial tools from Rome's Malleus. Modern echo, surveillance states micro-traumas. Thorn questions fabrication for land grabs, but wound descriptions align. Communities crumbled, artisans vanished, crafts faltered, the castle's finery fraying like its foundress's facade. Elizabeth needled narratives, unraveling resolve. No heroes from holes, only husks, pricked into passivity. The pinnacle loomed, nobility ensnared, the system scaling its summit in sanguine summit. As needles dropped, the apex assaulted, noble blood, the ultimate ablation, the castle cresting cruelty's curve. Winter's Eve 1610, solstice fires guttering in village hearths, the Varg a black ribbon under starless vault. Snow squeaked under sleds ferrying guests, the air crystalline with pine and portent. Elizabeth in the banquet hall, tapestries of arras, hunts frozen in thread, chandeliers dripping wax tears, scent of mulled wine cloying, masking dread. Crisis crested Matthias's auditors inbound, Thurzó's net tightening, debts a noose, invitations gilded, wardship and refinement for the court. Taste the clove-spiced dread. She was Clara, 34, a minor noble's daughter from the Garamschent Benedict line, elegant in damask, hair upswept with pearls, eyes blue as Danube ice, widowed by duel, her estates contested, seeking alliance, escorted with fanfare, mind on matchmaking. To the tower chamber, silks stripped, the initiation. A velvet harness suspending, implements arrayed scalpels from the chirurgeon's kit for elevation. Clara invoked lineage, voice steel on family honor, gut twisting. The carving commenced, Elizabeth wielding, Cabal assisting in surgical sanctity. Skip the excision. They lowered her at Lord's. Essence ebbed, yet she intoned Te Deum, nobility's nucleus uncrushed. This aristocratic assault unmasked the machine's megalomania, hierarchy hoisted on its petard, devouring the elite to affirm the eminence. Trial lists name 30 such, per Nagy, tying to Habsburg purges. Debate rages political purge, yet patterns persist. Elites estranged, alliances severed, courts wary, the realm's nobility netted in fear. Elizabeth, eviscerated, equals, equalizing in erasure. No legends from lacerations, only lacunae, the social summit snow-capped in silence. While Elizabeth orchestrated these crescendos of control, she erred irrevocably, targeting a lineage laced with loyalty to the crown, igniting the fuse that would fell her fortress. The conspiracy coalesced in the taverns of Pressburg, where whispers wove wider than webs. Foremost was Moritz Benko, bailiff of the Nadasdy estates, a wiry man of 40 with ledgerer's ink stains on cuffs. His motivations, a brew of avarice, an atonement, eyewitness to a half-dozen discipline sessions. His niece vanished into the castle's moor in 1608. He confided in Thurzó's nephew, a minor clerk nursing grudges over unpaid stipends, their talks lubricated by Tokaji Azu in shadowed booths. Joined was the Lutheran pastor of Bekov, Elias Czegledy, gaunt and gospel-fierce, driven by parish ledgers of missing daughters, 20 souls in 3 years, their absence a sermon unspoken. Motivations layered. Benko sought salvage of his soul and scraps of seized land. Czegledy, justice as jihad against the popish witchery tainting his flock. The clerk, petty payback amplified by uncle's ambition. The plot unfolded in ciphered letters, borne by peddlers' packs from October 1610. Benko smuggling witness affidavits, parchments smudged with maids' shaky script detailing the winnowings and temperings. Czegledy rallied survivors, 3 women cloaked as pilgrims, their testimonies taped to Matthias's privy council via Viennese Jesuits. Thurzó, the Palatine, pounced his own designs on Čachtice's quarries and vineyards, debts to the crown forgiven in the bargain. By December 20, King's warrant sealed, a cadre of 50 hussars massed in the foothills, their lances muffled in sacking. Present tense grips. The 30th of December 1610. Dawn bleeds grey over the Varg, hounds baying false trails as hussars crest the ridge, hooves thudding like heartbeats. Gates yield to battering rams, wood splintering with a groan that wakes the keep. Elizabeth stirs in her canopied bed, damask tangled, Darvulia fleeing through a postern into drifts. Thurzó storms the great hall, boots echoing, finding 2 young women scarcely past girlhood, chained to the dais, their forms huddled, breaths shallow. By the king's grace this den ends, he thunders, chains clattering free. The cabal scatters, Fichko to the stables, blade to throat by dawn, Sentes and Joe to cells, shrieking imprecations. Elizabeth's arrest, swathed in furs, unresisting, led to the tower under guard, her gaze not defiance but vacancy. the machine's monarch dethroned. Accomplices' fates. Darvulia vanished, folklore's ghost. The others tried in Bitcher, 1611. Ilona and Dorothea burned at the stake in Pressburg Square, flames devouring their denials, amid crowds jeering Blood Witch. Vixko beheaded, head spiked on the Varg Bridge as Corvid feast. Benko profited, granted a manor. Chegledy preached triumph, his pulpit gilded by royal arms. Power transferred in a whirlwind. Matthias annexed the estates, auctioning Sava to loyalists. Pal exiled to debtors' obscurity. Chaos erupted, immediate servants fled en masse, livestock rustled, the domain, a ghost yard by spring. Riots flared in Nitra, peasants torching bailiffs' barns, cries of Báthory's curse mingling with Ottoman opportunists probing the vacuum. Thurzó's triumph soured, whispers of his complicity in the exaggerations. 650 victims tallied to justify the grab dogged his court. Elizabeth walled in 12 rooms of Čachtice, fed through a slot, her death in 1614 from seizure unmarked, body denied Christian earth. This is what transpires when the mechanism malfunctions. It masticates the makers, spewing shards that scar the successors. The system endured, of course, new lords, same ledgers, the serfs' chains reforged subtler. Hungary's fractures deepened, the long war reigniting in 1616, devouring the distracted. Elizabeth's era, aiming the harvester at nobility, whose kin carried quills to kings. But the true fracture was the facade cracked, revealing not one villainess, but a vernacular of violence embedded in the empire's code. The meaning unfurls not in myth's crimson bath, that 1729 libel by Jesuit Laszlo Turoczi, peddled for pulpits, but in the mundane mound of records, exhumed to etch the era's indictment. Consider the discovery, January 1611, in the frost-bitten scriptorium of Bitcher Castle, amid the Inquisition's interim hearings. Thurzó's scribes, huddling over braziers in a chamber reeking of wet vellum and tallow, sifted the seized trunks from Čachtice leather-bound tomes pried from Elizabeth's oaken coffer, their pages warped by damp. One clerk, a bespectacled Transylvanian named Janos Kadar, fingers numb, unrolled a ledger, columns of names, dates, dispositions. Kata, Beckow, 23, Winnovet 1106, Maria, Trencin, 28, Temperet 1107. Over 80 entries, noble daughters interspersed with peasant maids, the script Elizabeth's own flourishes matching her marriage contracts, inked in iron gall that flaked under touch. Kadar recoiled, breath-catching. This wasn't witch's grimoire, but accountant's audit, the horror in its banality. He summoned Thurzó, who scanned by candle, face ashen, muttering Deo gratias laced with greed. The find proved systemic, not sporadic, cross-referenced with survivor oaths. The ledger's dates aligning with village censuses showing demographic divots. Scientific scrutiny came later. 1,980 seconds forensic paleography at the Hungarian Academy, ultraviolet scans revealing erased tallies, carbon dating the vellum to 1,590 seconds oak. No blood recipes, but notations of essences extracted, hinting at the pseudoscience of vitalism that gripped Renaissance courts. Why it endures, this ledger bridges then, and now, a Rosetta for recognizing rapacity. It teaches that atrocity accrues in increments, a switch, a pin, a political pretext, mirroring Enron's cooked books, or Epstein's flight logs, where elite excess erodes the ethical floor. Psychologically, it illuminates attachment disorders in the isolated, Elizabeth's orphaning echoing in her adoptions of vitality per Booth's trauma lens. Parallels glare in contemporary Hungary's migrant crises, where borders brutalize the borderless, or global gig economies that optimize out lives. Remembering matters because erasure is the tyrant's first tactic. These names, though contested Mostyn's 2024 exculpation arguing coerced confessions, persist as protest, their ink indelible. It's not about folklore's fangs. It's about what authority attempts when it aspires to immortality, annihilating the animate to affirm the apex and the rebound when records refuse rot. The Habsburgs reigned 4 centuries more, but couldn't consign 80 women, their resilience rendered in reluctant script, to dust. Ponder that. Ledgers outlast lords. The young women of Čachtice were engineered to evaporate. Their essences evaporated into ether, their echoes engineered into oblivion. That was the blueprint, etched in birch switches and iron tallies, the system's solemn sacrament. But they didn't dissipate. They endure. In the brittle folios of Bitcher, where Kardar's gasp ghosted the air, in the Bratislava pyres, where Ilona's final miserere mocked the flames, in the Varg's currents, carrying whispers of paternoster from thawed lips, in the archives of Vienna and Budapest, where scholars like Kraft and Nagy sift strata for truth's glint, their debates a dialogue with the departed. And now, they're here with you, in the screen's glow. The scrolls pause, the breath you draw in quiet reckoning. Because you elected to attend, you chose to excavate the ledgers, to lend ear to the erased. You declined to let their hush be history's coda. Nem tunek el, siyasak, atalakulnak. They do not vanish, they transform, as the old Magyar proverb holds. Their transformation, your testimony. You're not mere observer, you're archivist, the chain unbroken. To witness is to wield memory as weapon, transmuting trauma into talisman against tomorrow's tyrants. These tales tether us to the tender underbelly of power, reminding that the castle's drawbridge drops both ways, inviting ingress for empathy, egress for the unchecked. We owe the past precision, not pity's veil, but propinquity's probe, asking how our ledgers, budgets, algorithms, attitudes commodify the cornered. In a world where number Me Too unmasks the manners, and whistleblowers weather the winnowing, their resistance resonates. The switch survived, but so did the song. If this chronicle stirred sediments in your soul, if Cater's cadence or Rosalia's rasp lingered like half-remembered hymns linger in the comments, what pierced you? What parallel pricks today? Pose your queries. These colloquies, these confrontations with the chasm, forge the bulwark. That's how we ensure the machine rusts, the ghosts gain ground. If you hold that hues like theirs faded yet fervent merit magnification, subscribe. Not for spectacle, but for the silences yet to shatter, the strata still to scan, the spirits scripted to fade, but fiercely, forever, foregrounded. Elizabeth presided 4 years widowed, erecting an edifice that schooled every successor sadist in the syllabus of subjugation. Isolate, inventory, immolate. And the syllabus never sundered. But neither did their defiance.